Hello and welcome. I'm Kay with Ecstatic Self, and today we are back with Mr. Darren Main, continuing a conversation that we started with him just recently. At the end of our last video, he described himself as a man who is a little bit like a dumpster fire with a yoga mat and a mantra. And I am totally loving that and think that will inspire the beginning of our conversation today. If you haven't yet checked out his book, The River of Wisdom, 100 Life-Changing Reflections, please do. It is a beautiful series of little thoughts to get you in a more mindful, more heart-open, more loving space for your day and for your world. So welcome back, Darren. So glad to be here with you.
Yeah, it feels like just a few minutes ago that we were chatting.
It's crazy. We're even wearing the same clothes.
Yeah,
And everything. How does
same
that
clothes.
Short story, I'm a slob and don't change out of their shirt. Except when I'm naked, which I apparently am a lot. Anywho, all right, so back. We left off with this idea of the messiness in spiritual living and how to live a mindful, well-examined life is to wrangle with the difficulties, to wrangle with our shadow, that all of it is welcome to be present. And so I thought I'd kick us off right now with a thought that I have about traumatic, difficult experiences in life. This is a thought that I will totally credit to Elizabeth Lesser, fabulous, fabulous writer and speaker. But she has this idea of trauma can do two things to us. It can shut us down or it can crack us open. And in fact, in your book, The River of Wisdom, you have a beautiful little analogy of saying pressure can be like an egg. When it's from the outside, it can kill life. When the pressure comes from the inside, it can create new life. I think there's a lot of similarities with that. And I hope I'm quoting you approximately correctly.
I don't remember that one.
Well, you wrote it, and it was really lovely. It stuck with me. But this idea that the challenges in life are not a bad thing. And that's a very unpopular idea in Western culture because we want to say I'd have a beautiful life if it weren't for all the shit. If only my third grade teacher didn't, do that thing and give me that poor grade, I would have had a fabulous life. But in reality, when we're living a more spiritual existence, we see all of these challenges as being like our obstacle course or our training ground that gives us the opportunity to grow into a stronger, more compassionate, more loving, more forgiving, more agile human being. And that pressure can crack us open rather than shut us down. What are your thoughts?
There's a beautiful quote from Swami Satchidananda that I read many years ago that I think speaks to this a little bit. He talks about the natural way is that we don't see energy and power expressed in a river until you put a dam, right? That it can be a powerful river, but you just don't see it because it's running so smoothly. But as soon as you put a rock in the water, you can see it in the form of rapids or a dam and it's generating electricity or whatever. And I really like that image. It is the challenge. It is the hurt. It is the pain. I mean, Buddha talked about the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering. Mm-hmm. And it is a holy truth. It's a noble truth. It's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if it ends there, if you don't have the other three to follow it, right? Yeah. So, or in the Bhagavad Gita, the yoga of Arjuna's despair, pain, hardship. These things are the first step on our journey, a journey that starts over every time we wake up in the morning, right? And so looking at your life, you can say, poor me, I'm such a victim. Look at the terrible things that have happened to me. This is why I'm such a mess. Or you can look at these things and say, wow, that really sucked. What can I learn from it? Yeah. Right? It's like when you're making an omelet, and you sort of really fuck it up, you go, I guess I'm having a scramble, right? You get to choose what you do with this. And I think yoga teaches us that. The poses that teach us the most are the ones that challenge us the most. Left to my own devices, like when I roll out my mat at home, I do all my favorite poses. And it's not that it's bad, it's wonderful. But when I really grow is when either I find that self-discipline, or more likely than not, an external teacher disciplines me by saying, okay, now we're doing this pose you hate, hold it, hold it, breathe, hold it. That's where the best part of yoga happens. And so I think as queer men, as any person who's been marginalized, hurt, put down, abused, assaulted, all of that, it sucks. I don't want to minimize that challenge. I don't want to sit here and say it's easy if you've had a traumatic past. But what I do want to say is that the healing happens when you view that trauma, that pain through a different lens. And you know, sometimes we go back and forth. You know, sometimes I just need to be a victim, and that's okay. But there are those moments when you're ready, when you can look at it through a different lens, and there is such profound growth and wisdom in that if you're open to it.
You know, I feel like that is such a beautiful yogic idea of viewing everything that comes into your life as being your teacher. The pretty, the not so pretty. I remember once in hearing a yoga story by some Swami about how pain should be like a house guest. You open your door, you invite them to tea, you ask them why they're there, what do they have to teach you, and then when they're ready to go, you let them go. But you know, I personally, and I don't know if this is something that everybody wants or is capable of or would want to strive to, but personally, one of my missions in life is to arrive at a state where I can be genuinely grateful, and not just like, oh, I'm grateful, but like genuinely grateful and even thankful and maybe even celebrating the really shitty stuff that happens. Because it's helped me grow, it's helped me heal. And ultimately, when I think of the person I want to be, and you look at this in the greatest spiritual teachers, whether you look at this as being Christ, or you look at this as being like some great yogic saint, or you look at this as being like the Buddha, is no matter what somebody does to me, I love them. And I love them. And I love them.
Yeah.
And
I think
not easy.
Oh, go ahead. Finish.
It's not easy. And as you just said too, about we sometimes flick back into the victim. You know, there was in my meditation this morning, I was very, very strongly feeling. I lived in an ashram for 7 years, and the woman who ran it was very abusive. I didn't realize at the time, but in hindsight, and my meditation this morning was connecting with that anger and saying, you know, fuck you, you fucking bitch. Like, how the fuck did you do this to somebody? How did you do this to all these people? Fuck you. And to say, that's okay. Like, you're allowed to feel those things. And can we heal from it? Can we also come back to that place? As soon as I said that, say, okay, no, I'm going to go back to I love you. And I hope, you know, sending you blessings, and I'm sending you peace. And thank you for what you taught me. And I hope you don't hurt anyone else again. But it's a journey.
You know, when I give talks and sometimes people message me or whatever, I get the new spiritual buzzword is spiritual bypass. And I sort of like it. I hate buzzwords, but I sort of like this one. And I think it's an important question. It's the idea of denialism wrapped in a spiritual veneer. You know, that I'm not going to do my work, right? I'm just going to pretend that it's all okay and that I've transcended it when I really haven't. And I'm going to throw a few Sanskrit words at it to make it sound uber spiritual. That is not what I am advocating. And I don't think that's what you're advocating at all. I think that those painful moments are hard and we wrestle with them. And sometimes you say, fuck you, bitch, for hurting me. And that's perfectly okay. I think it's more the openness to see that pain as something more than just a burden you have to carry, something that broke you, that ruined you, that you can never be happy and whole. Again, that it can be an opportunity to look at something much, much deeper. But that does not mean it's easy. If it were easy, we'd all be fully enlightened. We'd all be hanging out with Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Moses and Krishna, right? We're not there, most of us, and that's okay. but just this notion that because this happened to me, I can no longer be healed or whole or complete or happy, that I am just broken, I am damaged. That is a very toxic and dangerous thing, as is pretending that it's all okay when it's really not. And finding that middle path. And I think, again, my path is yoga, so that's where I keep returning to. But I think shamanism, so much of shamanism is about going into that dark place. When Yoda sends Luke into that cave and he's like, "Are you afraid?" And he's like, no, I'm not afraid. He's like, "You will be." Right. The work, it's not just like, hey, here's this thing called the Force. Here's a lightsaber, have fun, you're a Jedi now. It's, you got to go into the cave, you got to face Darth Vader, you got to look at your demons. And so I don't know exactly how that fits into your question, but I do think you're onto something.
Well,
making it okay to be pissed off.
well, and to say that, we hear the term middle path a lot when it comes towards, especially Buddhism, but spiritual work in general, right? Like, you don't want a string that's pulled too tight, it will snap. You don't want a string too loose, it will not make music. We just stay in the middle. But in my experience, the middle path often looks more like a squiggly curve between two lines that eventually starts to move towards the middle. But you may go through periods of spiritual bypassing because you just can't deal with it right now. And you may go through periods of intense rage and anger because you're very intensely dealing with it now. And you might vacillate between the two in the course of 5 minutes. And that's okay. It's okay. And that's one of the things that I try to really affirm to myself as to other people. To live a spiritually encompassing life means we encompass all of ourselves. And that means some days we're going to be feeling really shitty. Some days we're going to be totally fine. Some days we're going to be avoiding, and to say, whatever you're going through is okay. I mean, so long as you're doing your work, so long as you're trying, so long as you're growing, you're going to have days where you are not in the best state, and that is perfectly acceptable. It's okay to be where you are. And
I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sure it was.
Well, then I'll add one more thing, which was I feel like it's a frustration I have with the spiritual community as a whole, is this idea of we should always be good. Like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing really great. I'm having, fabulous breakthroughs, and I'm feeling amazing, and I'm feeling radiant, and I'm in touch with my chi and my zen and my all 29 major chakras. And to say, to be doing spiritual work, to be on a soulful, self-inquiring journey means some days you're going to be shit. And it's totally okay to be shit today. You don't always have to be like, oh, I'm rocking it. Yes, and if I'm not, then I've got my mantra I can use, and it's going to zap me into the right place. Like, no, today I might just be shit. This week I might just be shit. And that's perfect.
Yeah. I think one of the most spiritual postures for me in yoga is when I'm in child doing a nice ugly cry. Right? It's not pretty to watch. It doesn't look all that noble or dignified. And yet there's something like a demon being excised in that moment, because I've truly surrendered. I've stopped pretending to be okay, and I'm just letting it out. But on the other side of that is a freedom, like this expanded freedom, because I'm no longer holding on to this thing that I've been carrying. The samskara, at least that one little one, has been let go of. And so it's a big part of my mission in more recent years. I used to be the whole namaste hippie granola yogi, and I did some good work, to be fair. I mean, I don't want to dismiss everything I ever did, but I think the ability to just be a little less sanctimonious and a little more embracing of the whole of life, seeing it all as having a purpose, even if I can't see what that purpose is, even if it's ugly, and especially if it's my own crap.
Your ugly crying in child's pose reminds me of this idea of purging. So in my physical practice, I have very, very open hips. I always have. Baddha Konasana, bound ankle pose, chest to my feet, put my feet behind my head, totally, always super easy. But I was having intimate time with my husband recently, and I had my legs wrapped around him, and he was massaging the front of my pelvis, like right where the hips and pelvic bone meet. And just the lightest touch would make me spasm and curl up in myself and want to weep, in the sense of feeling like I was made of glass and so fragile and wanting to scream, "Don't hurt me." And I've always been aware that I'm very sensitive there. But it was an interesting moment for me of saying, wow, look at this area that I tend to think of myself as being very open, very expansive, totally fine. To have this experience of saying, oh, wow, there's something really deep and primal that needs to be invited into the space. I don't want to say he needs to be excised or exercised or purged, but to say that part of our spiritual journey is to constantly wrangle with these things that come up that may not be pretty, that may not be easy, to dance with them, to invite healing, to invite space, and then to move through them. And sometimes that means ugly crying. Sometimes that means, physically bucking and feeling vulnerable. But to say, as a person on a journey, I'm going to be open to all my bits. I'm going to allow them to be there. I'm going to allow them to pass through as they need to, and to allow what needs to be to be.
That's a beautiful saying. Your biography is written in your biology. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons I think I like any kind of physical work, like yoga, body work, martial arts, because we can sort of get super clever at like talking and being in our heads and, putting a happy talk on whatever our neuroses. But when you get into your body, it's like, there's that area you get to in yoga, or when you're having sex with somebody you love or whatever, where you can't lie anymore. It just like exposes something that you didn't even know you were holding on to. I always tell my students, it's the issues and the tissues that are exposed. And it's such a beautiful, it's like a fast track to finding whatever you're still holding on to. Yeah. And all of a sudden you find yourself crying and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah. I thought I was done there, but evidently not.
Yeah. And the beauty of a physical yoga practice to help you start to open up through those areas and start to release. I think we do ourselves such a disservice in Western culture to view the mind and body as being separate entities, because really they're not. Yeah. They're just extensions of each other.
I had a guy go through one of my teacher trainings years ago, and he was sort of stereotypical, sort of straight guy, personal trainer. Yoga was becoming more and more the in exercise to do at the gym, and he wanted to add that to his repertoire of like personal training and other stuff. And so he did my training, and I think he was sort of looking to learn the anatomy, learn the poses, learn the alignment. And we certainly did some of that, but a couple sessions in, he pulled me aside before class and he burst into tears. He said, I can't stop crying. What's wrong with me? And I'm like, that is amazing. And he's like, what the fuck do you mean that's amazing? And I'm like, you're not breaking, you're healing. Yeah. Those tears are washing away something you've been holding on to so tight for so long. You may not even know what it's about, and that's fine. You don't even need to know what it's about. You're just washing away something that you no longer need. That's as good. You'll stop crying eventually, and you'll be back to smiling. Don't worry. It's like the weather. It'll come, it'll go, it'll come back again. It rains, it's sunny, it's windy. The weather changes. But this is good. This is why we do yoga. The issues and the tissues are coming out. Yay for you. Mm-hmm. Means you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And if you believe in reincarnation, it's not even necessarily issues from this lifetime. So you won't even necessarily know it's like, oh, this happened from this thing when I was 6 years old. I mean, if you believe in karma and reincarnation, then these are things we're holding inside of ourselves from potentially
Yeah.
thousands of years.
I've had people say to me, I don't believe in reincarnation, so can I sort of get into yoga or yoga philosophy or yoga for more than just the exercise? And I'm like, yoga happens in this moment. It doesn't happen back when you were a child and experienced that trauma, or when you were 20 and experienced that trauma, or 5 lifetimes ago when you experienced that trauma. Your work is now. So something happens somewhere along the line, this life, a past life, a childhood, somewhere. It doesn't matter. You don't even need to understand it. You just need to let it go. And it's sort of beautiful and freeing when you recognize that somewhere at some point in some lifetime, I picked up this habit of holding on to this thing, this samskara. And when you're done, you're done. And you're always done in this moment. It might be this moment 10 years from now or 10 lifetimes from now. But healing happens in the moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's this past week, me and my husband both caught COVID.
Oh,
And for the first time in a long time, I ended up in bed for a couple days, which is, I feel very blessed that my spiritual work, my physical practice, all of that has helped make me a very healthy person in a way that I wasn't as a younger individual. But one of the things that I've really tried to do as this physical sickness come up is to really sit with and ask, like, what do you want me to learn? And I may have a concrete answer to that. I may have a very non-concrete answer, just something, a feeling, a sensation to say it doesn't matter. Everything that comes into my life, including illness, including sensations in my body that I don't understand, can be an opportunity for healing and growth. And that we all have so many samskaras layered upon each other that, there will never be an end to the store. And so we just work with what's coming up at the moment.
yeah. When I was in my late 20s, I found out I was HIV positive. And it was a time when things were looking a little bit better for HIV, but not a lot better. The medications were pretty brutal, just marginally more effective, but still pretty awful. And I was such an arrogant, young man. I just really believed that, I meditate and I do yoga and I shop at the health food co-op and, I'm taking my supplements and HIV has no power over me. This was before The Secret, but it was that sort of bullshit mentality that if I just envision wealth, I'll live in a mansion. And so I didn't take meds for quite some time, and I did live pretty well. And I think part of that is attributed to the fact that I did take care of myself. I mean, it does work. I mean, somebody who's healthy is probably going to fare better than someone who is not all that healthy. But ultimately, my lab numbers plummeted, and I started to get sick. And I had this sort of come to Jesus moment where HIV is an actual thing, and I'm in an actual human body, and HIV and the human body do fight for space. And, as long as I'm in this body, I have to obey certain rules. And it's sort of that arrogance of thinking like I'm different than every other human on the planet. And I had a similar thing, not quite as extreme, but with COVID, it's like, okay, I do yoga and I got COVID. Right? This is what happens when you live in a body. You're not being punished. It's just bodies interacting with viruses. But it was such a learning opportunity to look at that profound arrogance, and it made me such a better teacher and healer once I was forced to look at my arrogance around that.
Totally. Something I comment on is that, yes, we are all spirits, right? We are all something eternal, timeless, ineffable, something that has always been, always will be, part of God, through God. But we also chose to incarnate in this reality. And when you choose to incarnate in a reality, you're going to have to play by the rules of that reality. And yes, as you spiritually evolve and become more expansive and reunite more with that God consciousness of which we are all a part, the rules of this reality become a little more pliable. You get to start to play with them maybe a little bit more and find where you can start to push some. But the amount of spiritual force that is required to completely shatter the rules of this reality is more than most of us either have or are willing to give. So is
Yeah.
it possible to accumulate enough spiritual force that you could decide that's not a tree, it's a dog, and magically it becomes a dog instead of a tree? Potentially, yes. Is it possible you could say, I am going to use my spiritual energy to stay healthy despite having a horrible, horrible infection? Yes, it's entirely possible. And we do see historically great saints who are able to do that, who,
Yeah.
someone gives them poison and they drink it just fine, but the person who gave it to them dies of poisoning instead.
Yeah.
We hear stories of like that where people are able to snap the rules of our reality, but most of us do not live in that state. And it is no fault of your own for any of us to say, hey, I did this thing. I had a response that was typical for the rules of this reality I live in. That doesn't mean I'm a poor spiritual practitioner. Does not mean that
Yeah.
you are a poor yogi because you had to start taking HIV meds. It doesn't mean that I was a poor yogi because I got sick with COVID. It means that's the reality of this universe, and
Yeah.
it's okay.
The spiritual bypass we were just talking about, I saw that a lot with COVID and sort of around, there's different strains of the anti-vax movement. But one in the yoga world was, I'm evolved enough that I don't need a vaccine to stay healthy. Fair enough. Maybe you're Jesus or Buddha. Good for you. But I would frequently, when I was giving talks, say, here's how you know if you're spiritually evolved enough not to need Western medicine to stay healthy, or herbs or whatever you're doing to stay healthy. I want you to get a hammer, put your thumb down on the counter, and then smash your thumb really hard with the hammer.
Right.
If you're afraid to do that, if you have some resistance or hesitation, then you're still very much attached to and embodying your body. Mm-hmm. And if you do it and it really hurts and you're swearing and cursing instead of saying namaste, all is good, peace, love, happiness, and granola, then you're still in your body and you might want to consider taking whatever medicine you need to stay healthy. We are in these bodies. We are attached to these bodies. So if you're going to hesitate when it comes to smashing your thumb with a hammer, then I suggest you consider that when it comes to something like COVID, HIV, cancer,
Amen.
Driving recklessly without your seatbelt on. I'm not telling anybody what to do medically. Like, you go, do you take what medicine you want, ignore your doctor if you feel it's a good idea. I don't recommend it. But consider that. Smash your thumb. Next time you stub your toe, notice your reaction. If it's a negative one, then I suggest you consider the fact that you're still in a body.
Because theoretically, you're right. Theoretically, you could reach a point in your spiritual practice where you have identified so much with the space between the molecules in your thumb to realize that you are not a solid being, that when a hammer passes through onto you, it just passes straight through and you endure no physical damage because you have evolved into such a pure state. Theoretically, that may be possible. There are stories of such. I have personally not yet met a yogi who is able to demonstrate that possibility, but I love it that you're offering it as an option for people that perhaps they will be there. Perhaps.
Yeah, so go get that hammer.
Yeah,
you'll learn pretty quickly if you're that evolved.
Yes, exactly.
I'm probably going to get sued because people are going to have broken thumbs and because they took my bad yoga advice and smashed their thumb with a hammer. Please don't do that at home. It's a terrible idea.
I do remember hearing stories of like certain, I don't remember who it was as a historical figure, but some famous guru who, to teach their students a lesson, like went over to a wall of a cave and like pushed his hand into the stone, and theoretically you can still go to that cave today and like see this handprint in the stone.
Hmm.
Very, very Yoda, Jedi-ish sort of trick.
Yeah.
But
I don't believe it. That is why you fail.
most of us aren't in that state yet.
Well, I mean, like Autobiography of a Yogi is one of my favorite books, and it's filled with these stories of and Babaji is the deathless saint up in the mountains, and the guy goes looking for him, and
Mm-hmm.
for years and years, finally finds him, and Babaji says, "I can't take you as my disciple. You're not ready." And he says, "If you don't take me, I have no reason to live. I'm going to hurl myself off that cliff." He said, "Well, do it. You're not ready." And he throws himself off the cliff, and the other disciples go fetch the body, and Babaji brings him back to life and says, "Now you're ready." Now, that's a nice story, but I don't recommend it. Like, is it a true story? Well, maybe not. I don't know. But like Joseph Campbell said, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true.
Amen.
Right? There is truth in that story that you have to be willing to die in order to embrace the new. But I don't think you have to hurl yourself off a cliff to get there.
Yeah.
But, to each his own.
I think our whole world would be better if we were a little less literal about truth, especially when it comes to spiritual texts like the Bible, and say, maybe this isn't factual. Maybe there's an element of truthful parable in it.
Have you seen the movie The Body?
I have not.
Antonio Banderas plays a Catholic priest, and his job, he's sent by the Vatican. He's sent all over the world to investigate these claims, miraculous or archaeological claims, to see if there's any validity to them. And there is a body that is discovered in Israel, and it has all the markings, like rust marks on the ribs and stuff on the skeleton, where Jesus would have been stuck with the spear, and it says Jesus on the tomb, and so it looks like, oh my God, this could be the remains of Jesus. And he goes to investigate it, and he's with this skeptical reporter, and she's like, "I don't understand what the big deal is. Like, so you find the body of Jesus. Isn't this an amazing relic, an incredible find?" He's like, "Christians believe Jesus rose from the dead. There is no body. The body rose from the dead and then ascended." And it's that crisis of faith. I won't tell you how it ends, but what he goes through with his attachment to that story as it is told, as a literal story, is interesting. And I think we as yogis could benefit from that, because we have our own stories that we tell. And they're not without merit. They're not bad stories. We just have to put them in their place. Or we can find ourselves in a similar situation where we start to question the validity of the practice as a whole.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned that specific book, Autobiography of Yogi. When I was early in my sadhana, I read that and I remember feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not a good practitioner because I'm not having all these mystical experiences like he talked about. Like, maybe there's something wrong with me. And I reapproached that book again recently because I actually recommended it to someone. And so I wanted to just re-examine it. And I was like, oh, having now been to India several times and have heard Indian people tell stories, I'm starting to sense a little bit more about the truth in this rather than the factuality.
Yeah, every restaurant you go to, we have the best dal of any place in India.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Wonderful. Well, Darren, I think we'll pause here for today. I would love to keep having conversations with you whenever you're available, because I think you are just such a stellar human being, such a fabulous yogi and gentleman and a scholar. So thank you so much for your time today.
Only part of that is true. I won't tell you which part.
I'm going to go with the gentleman. No, Alan? I was trying to give you something sexy.
I'm not a scholar either, but I try and be a decent person.
That's good.
Yeah, you know what I would love? We talked about this one-on-one privately, and I'd love to hear what your audience thinks. I think a live stream would be really fun, where we bring in like others into the people, viewers, like, what are your questions? What's on your mind? What insights do you have into these things we're discussing?
I love that.
Just sort of really rich conversation with other gay men. I think it would be really amazing. So let's chat about
Well,
that.
why don't we get that scheduled? And that'd be absolutely fun to have more interaction. But thank you all for taking some time to watch. Please check out Darren's work, support him. His website is darrenmain.com. Did I get that right?
You did?
I did. Great. Check out his books, check out his YouTube channel, check out all of his social media profiles. Go take class with him if you're in the San Francisco area. And thank you so much for all your heart and all that you do.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste.